Okay, mic test. Hello. Mic test. Rinig ba ako, guys?
Yes po, sir. Rinig po.
Yes po, sir.
Okay. So today's topic is about cells. For most of you, you have studied the basics of cell structure in anatomy and physiology. But this time, we're going to look also in the prokaryotic cell. Okay. We're going to look at the structures of the prokaryotic cell. Okay, from what you remember, can someone tell me the difference between a prokaryotic cell and a eukaryotic cell? Okay, anyone? You don't remember? Yes, Miss Bilason.
Yes po. Yung prokaryotic po, ano po siya? Bacteria. Tapos eukaryotic po, ano po siya? From plants, fungi, parasites, ganun po.
Okay, so tama. So basically, pag mga prokaryotes like bacteria, in general, you can see the diagram there. You can see that the prokaryote doesn't have a nucleus. You just have a region where you have the genetic material or the DNA, but you don't have a nucleus. So we will talk in detail the special structures of the prokaryotic cell and the difference between gram-positive and gram-negative bacteria as well. Okay? So if we look under the microscope, very diverse ang mga structures ng mga cells. So some can move around, some can make their own food, some can have clusters, while in eukaryotic cells, in complex organisms, we have specialized tissues, etc. Okay? So before the discovery or the use of the microscope, it was difficult to understand the basic unit of life, right? So imagine if you were not aware of microorganisms or what do you call this? That life comes from other life, you might think that whenever rain comes, for example, so when it's dry season, there's no frogs. Tapos umulan, bigla magkakaroon ng maraming frogs, no? So isipin mo, baka yung frogs galing sa ano? If you were someone who is not aware of the biology of that life comes from other life, you might think yung mga frogs na yan came out of nowhere. Okay? And pati yung rats. Isipin mo na rats came out of nowhere basta may mga sirang grain ka, no? So that idea was even accepted by Aristotle. He accepted that life can come from non-living things. So we call that theory a biogenesis. Okay, may A sa simula, a biogenesis. Compared to the idea that life comes from other life forms which we call biogenesis. Okay? So, dahil dun sa misconception ni Aristotle, kasi nga, siguro, yun yung thinking niya, nakita niya na, uy, mga frogs, bigla na lang nagsusulputan pag rainy season. Siguro, galing sa ulan yan. Or yung rats, they come from wet na grain. So, that idea persisted until Francesco Redi's experiment. So among the ideas na life comes from non-living things, katulad ng rotten meat, no? So maraming nag-iisip ng mga tao na yung rotten meat nagkakaroon ng flies. So yung flies ay galing sa rotten meat. So in his experiment, he placed meat sa 3 containers, isa walang takip, isa merong sealed, may seal from air and other elements. Ito gauze lang ang cover, so it allows air to come in. So he wanted to prove na yung ano na yan, yung flies na yan, hindi galing sa rotten meat. He wanted to prove that the flies come from other living things as well, from flies as well. So sa unang container, yung nagkaroon ng maggots, syempre dinapuan ng flies. Sa second container, nakaseal, walang dinadapuan na flies. So baka isipin ng tao, ay baka kasi wala yung oxygen kaya hindi nabubuhay yung hindi nagkakaroon ng flies, no? So dito sa gauze, papasok naman yung air. So kung galing talaga sa meat yan, dito magkakaroon ng maggots at saka flies. So dito na-prove niya na yung maggots na nasa meat ay galing sa flies. Okay? So he was the first one to disprove, lalo na for large organisms, yung hindi microscopic. He was the first one to prove that life comes from other life. So yung abiogenesis, maling theory yan. Okay? So ayan si Francesco Redi. Pero may ibang scientists like Needham, so hindi pa masyadong fine-tuned yung mga microscopes during that time. He did an experiment where he heated chicken broth, no? So, pag masira yun, mangangamoy yun, di ba? Pag iniwan mo, gawa sa mga chicken material. So, dun sa experiment niya, ininit niya. Tapos, he left it for several days. So, thinking na mamamatay yung mga organisms, iniwan lang niya. After several days, nagkaroon ng fermentation. Tapos, tinignan niya sa microscope, may microorganisms na ulit. So, sinasabi niya, yung mga microorganisms na yon spontaneously come from a life force. So, yun yung idea niya na, okay, so pwede is for large organisms, totoo yan, life comes from other life. Pero itong mga microorganisms, bigla na lang nagsusulputan. So, explanation yan, may life force. Kung saan nagagaling yung mga microbes. Like, yung nangyari sa fermentation. Okay? And then you have Spallanzani, who did an experiment to disprove yung ginawa ni Needham. So, ginawa niya yung experiment ni Needham, pero sinil niya mabuti yung flask. So, walang microorganisms na nabuhay after he heated it. Pero ang sabi ng ibang scientist, kasi hindi mo binigyan ng air yung yung microorganisms kaya hindi sila nabuhay. Okay. So yun, hindi pa totally na disprove ni Spallanzani si Needham. Okay? But at least it was an attempt. So along came Louis Pasteur. So what he did was he discovered may mga microorganisms na nasa air, no? So he examined the gun cotton filter. He discovered na may mga microorganisms doon. So inisip niya, hindi dahil sa life force yun, no? But instead, it comes from air. Yung microorganisms na yan, it comes from air. So he made a series of flasks na S-shape. And then he boiled the broth to sterilize it para matanggal yung mga microorganisms. Okay? So, ito yung experiment. Actually, in-explain ko na to nung first meeting natin, no? Gumawa siya ng special type of flask para pwede dumaan yung air, pero yung mga dust particles na pwedeng mag-carry ng microorganisms, magsisettle dito sa sa section na to. Okay? So he heated the chicken broth, and then pagkatapos na heat, no, he left it for several days. Walang fermentation na nangyari. Okay? He repeated the experiment. This time, he broke the flask. Yun, nagkaroon ng fermentation. So, ibig sabihin, yung fermentation galing sa mga microorganisms na nasa air. Okay? So, yun. Yan yung concept ng sourdough, no? Yung may yeast sa air. Kung iniwan mo yung sugar solution, eventually mag-ferment yan. May mga yeast particles ka sa air. So, ganun din yung pwede makontaminate ang food from air particles or from impurities in air. Okay? So, we have the concept that life comes from other life forms na generate yung modern cell theory that cell comes from other cells as well. So we have established that cells are the fundamental units of organisms. Okay? So how did this modern cell theory come about? So ganun una yung idea na biogenesis, that life comes from other life forms. And then you have Robert Hooke, who first observed that living things have compartmentalized structures he called cells, no? Similar to yung mga prison cells, ganun. So may compartment siya. Pero yung tinignan niya sa microscope, mga dead cells na. So wala na siyang mga organelles na nakita sa loob. Pero he was the first one to call it a cell. And then you have Schleiden, who made extensive microscopic observation of plant tissues. And he also described them of being composed of cells. So this time, alam nyo, may mga components. Mas detailed yung sinabi niya. And then you have Schwann. So he also made similar microscopic observation, this time animal tissues. So he observed similarities between plant and animal tissues. So this idea that plant and animals are made up of cells eventually was established by Virchow. So he popularized the cell theory. together with his colleague Robert Remarque. Okay? So yun, na-establish na yung idea na cells are the fundamental units of life, and other cells come from other cells as well. Okay? And then yung understanding ng eukaryotic cell, paano nag-develop? So meron kang eukaryotic cell, meron kang prokaryotic cell. Pero yung malaking question ng mga scientists, saan nanggaling yung mitochondria, no? Okay? So malaking mystery nun until someone came up with the endosymbiotic theory. So in endosymbiotic theory, we try to understand how the mitochondria, yung powerhouse of the cell, became assimilated into the eukaryotic cell. So yung ancient or proto-eukaryotic cell, wala pa yung mga mitochondria. At saka wala pa yung endoplasmic reticulum or other endomembrane components, no? So, yung proto-eukaryotic cell, eventually, yung infoldings niya doon sa loob ng cell membrane, it gave rise to yung endomembrane components. So, that includes the nucleus and the endoplasmic reticulum. And eventually, yung mitochondria mo ay galing siya sa aerobic bacteria. So, wala pang mitochondria nun. Na-absorb ng cell yung aerobic bacteria, and the aerobic bacteria had a symbiotic relationship with the host cell. Okay? So, over many years, over millions of years, naging part na siya ng eukaryotic cell. Okay? So, that's the first endosymbiotic event. And then, additional development ng eukaryotic cell, especially dun sa plant cell, yung mga aerobic mitochondria, aerobic bacterium na may photosynthetic capability, so gumagawa siya ng sariling food, eventually, it evolved into the chloroplast. So yung mga algae at saka mga plant cells na may chloroplast, this is the result of the assimilation of this photosynthetic bacteria. Okay? So yun yung development ng modern eukaryotic cell. And the theory is called endosymbiotic theory. Okay, so let's review. Last meeting, we talked about yung miasma theory, no, by the ancient Greeks. So yung bad air, it can cause disease, no? Fracastoro, he was the early proponent of germ theory, or the idea that microorganisms can cause disease, no? So ang tawag dun sa pathogenic microorganisms, shortcut nila germ. Okay? So yun nga, Hooke discovered cells under the microscope and he named it as such. And then you have Leeuwenhoek, who first observed these single-celled organisms using a microscope. He called them animalcules. And you have Semmelweis or Semmelweis, who demonstrated that hand washing reduces infections, no? So pag maghugas ka ng kamay, nakakabawas siya sa infection. And then 7 years later, you have Snow, who demonstrated that cholera bacteria was transmitted in contaminated drinking water. Yung cholera, napakaraming namamatay dun sa cholera, no? So, hindi nila alam pa paano natatransmit. So, they discovered na yung bacteria pala or yung disease ay caused by contaminated water. And then, 8 years later, ginawa ni Pasteur yung experiment na dinescribe ko. So, he disproved spontaneous generation or yung biogenesis with the S-shaped flask experiment. Okay? Tapos si Lister, he began using disinfectant. So, yung mga surgery dati, no, buhay talaga. As in, yung idea na, basta, halimbawa, in a bullet wound, no, so tatanggalin yung bullet sa loob ng katawan mo, o bahala na, pwede kang mabuhay. Pag tinanggal yung bullet, pwede kang mamatay dahil sa infection, no? So, Lister was the first one who used disinfectant during surgery. So, nabawasan yung mga deaths due to infection during surgery. Hindi pa masyadong malinis yung mga surgery noon. So, yung idea ng paggamit ng disinfectant was first. And then you have Koch, who finally determined that the cause for some disease are bacterial infections. Okay, so yung anthrax, basta maraming disease siya na discover um, that is due to bacterial infection. Okay. Okay. So at the simplest level, all cells possess a few fundamental components. So you have cytoplasm. So pinag-aralan nyo na to sa high school or uh, sa anatomy nyo last sem, no? So, okay, we have 10 minutes left. Okay, you have cytoplasm, so most of it is water, and you have dissolved chemicals there needed for growth, no? You have also chromosomes and genetic materials. Sa lahat ng cells, kahit eukaryotic cells, may genetic material ka. And you have also ribosomes. Okay, so let's look at the details of the prokaryotic cell. Okay. So you have prokaryotic cells. Ang main difference yun ng prokaryotic cells and eukaryotic cells, you have a nucleus for eukaryotic cells. Tapos yung marami kang mga organelles sa eukaryotic cells. They're larger, membrane-bound organelles na nandun sa eukaryotic cells na wala sa prokaryotic cells. So what you have instead in prokaryotic cells, you have a region of genetic material you call a nucleoid. So yung mga prokaryotes, nandyan sa domain ng archaea and bacteria. While the rest under the domain eukarya. So that includes animal and plant cells. So because yung eukaryotic cells, they need mas complex yung mas complex ang needs or energy needs ng eukaryotic cells, kaya kailangan niya ng mitochondria at saka mga membrane-bound organelles. Yeah, in prokaryotic cells, meron pa rin siyang mga um, compartmentalization sa cytoplasm. So yung mga inclusions ay yung mga um, nutrient-rich na components ng prokaryotic cell, pero wala siyang mga membrane-bound organelles. Okay, so ito yung itsura ng prokaryotic cell. So itong region ng DNA is called the nucleoid. So meron kang inclusions dyan or vacuoles. So aside from the DNA found here in the nucleoid region, meron ka pa ring extra chromosomal DNA. So we call that plasmid. So ito yung kinukuha natin sa sa bacteria. Tapos sa genetic technology, sinisingitan natin ng mga genes, no, para gumawa ng mga insulin and other important chemicals for our health or for medicine. Okay? So hindi siya hindi siya crucial para sa function ng cell, pero yung mga plasmid DNA, may mga genes yan to make for example anti or resistance to to antibiotics, for example, na develop dyan. Okay, so dito sa DNA dun sa nucleoid, ito ay important sa function ng cell mismo. Dito naman, hindi siya essential sa function ng cell, pero it is also needed for the cell to survive, yung mga proteins na gawa dyan sa DNA na yan. Okay, so you have the fimbriae, the pili. Ito yung fimbriae. Tapos yung pili, ito yung ginagamit sa conjugation, pagpalit ng mga genetic material. Yung fimbriae primarily pag-attach dun sa mga surfaces. And then yung flagella, ito yung ginagamit na panggalaw or motility ng bacteria. Okay? In addition to the cytoplasm, you have the cell membrane or the plasma membrane. And then you have also, for most bacteria, you have a cell wall to protect dun sa changes in osmotic pressure. And then you have also a capsule. So sometimes you have additional layer called the capsule pang protect dun sa bacteria. Okay, so we will learn about the cell morphology. So in addition to cellular shape, prokaryotic cells of the same species may be grouped together in certain distinctive arrangement depending on the plane of cell division. So let's look at several shapes. So yung pabilog, it's called coccus. Rod shape, it's called bacillus. Pag medyo curved yung rod, so we call it vibrio. Pag combination ng, yung medyo oblong siya, so combination of rod and round, magiging coccobacillus. And if you have a spiral shape, it's spirillum. Pag medyo mahaba yung spiral shape, so it's helical and loose, we called it spirochetes. Okay? So, ayan. Okay, so in terms of arrangement, no? So we add a prefix. So besides the shape, so pag singular, halimbawa, yan, coccus, isa lang. Pag dalawa siya, we call it diplococcus. Pag apat na magkasama, tetrad. Okay? And then if you have a chain of these ball-shaped bacteria, we call it streptococcus. Pag cluster naman, staphylo ang dinadagdag natin. Staphylococcus. Okay? So yung bacillus is single rod. Pag chain of rods, we call it streptobacillus. Okay, I will end it here. So join again para may new topic.